My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Hi, I'm Maya Hawke, and this is the LSQ podcast.
Hello, I'm Jenny LSQ. Thanks so much for pressing play on episode 108 of the LSQ podcast with the singer, songwriter, and actor Maya Hawke. This week brings the release of a beautiful new album by Maya called Chaos Angel. It's her third album so far and her most accomplished to date. It's an album that Maya says is the truest reflection yet of her artistic voice. I loved getting to ask her about the creative path that led to this album, the music she was into as a kid, how she discovered her own musicality, the way her approach to songwriting and lyric writing has changed, even just in the months since Chaos Angel was finished, and more. Let's get into it.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I kind of couldn't be better. I'm doing really good. It's a beautiful, overcast day in Atlanta. It's on and off raining. Everybody's healthy and good in my life, and I'm on a day off work, so I couldn't really and I get to talk to you, so I don't really have any complaints today.
Amazing. I love that. So for listeners, to orient you in space and time, we are in the month of March right now, but by the time you're hearing this, it is the week of Maya's new album, Chaos Angel, coming out. And so very exciting to think that it's that soon, right? I imagine from your perspective, it's been a lot of kind of hurry up and wait since it finished.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel soon, but I think a lot of artists would say this. I don't think it makes me special, but I don't make singles. I make albums. And so I really have been so excited for the record to come out in a whole. As much as like each single coming out is exciting, they're without the context of their brothers and sisters, they don't mean the same thing to me. So yes, it's soon after a long wait, but in some ways it feels like the furthest away it's ever felt, because now we're so close, and it's kind of this prolonged process of getting out the context, and I'm excited to do that. So
you led perfectly sort of into one of the things I wanted to start with, which is Chaos Angel, this new album, your third studio album. It has a story to it. It has a theme and a story that I'd like you to share with us. But I'm also so curious whether when in the process of making it, you knew that there was a story. Like, did you start with the story, or did the story arrive when a couple of songs had begun?
No, I started with the desire to make a record that was produced by Christian Lee Hudson, because when I worked with him on my second record, Moss, and he wrote songs for it, he wrote some music for it, I was like, oh my God, this is the first person I've ever written music with where the music that they wrote sounded like what I would write if I was a genius. And it sounded like it was exactly in tune with the lyrical meaning, and his production ideas felt so in kind with mine. And I think in my first two records, I was always working with geniuses that I admired and that I loved what they did. But what they did was I felt a lot of their personality coming through, and not always all of mine. And there was something about the way that Christian co-writes, as I think almost anyone that he has ever co-written with that you could talk to would say, is he really helps people express themselves. So I knew I wanted that. And I knew I wanted to take a bunch of the music that I had actually written in the last 5 years of making all these records that I had chosen not to record because I was insecure about it, frankly, and work with that Christian on that music to elevate it and bring it to a place where it was ready to share. And so that was what I knew I wanted to do. So I was kind of tracking through my old demos. Like Black Ice is a song that I've been working on for I don't know, since I was 19. And Dark, I've been working on since the middle of the pandemic. And there are seeds of Oh No that are really old, or Better that are really old. There's a bunch of songs on there. Promise is years old, or pieces of it are years old. So I kind of was going through my collection and wanted to sort it through with Christian and build a record that just had the best of me on it. It's my shortest record I've ever put out. So that's where that started. And then now if you look at the credits, there's a ton of songs that Christian and I wrote together. But when a couple months before we started recording, there were no songs. And I was like, I want there to be a song that I do the way that I've done all my other songs in the past, which is like I just write the lyrics and someone else just writes the music. And I want to do it with Christian because this record is a little different. Like I've written pieces of the music and all this, it's a little less clean cut. And there have been more co-writers on a lot of the songs. But I wanted to do it the old-fashioned way. And I wrote the poem that would become the title song, Chaos Angel. It would become the last song on the record. And I wrote that while I was working on this movie called Wildcat about Flannery O'Connor. And so I was really steeped in the imagery of Catholicism and really thinking about our spiritual nature and the relationship and connective tissue between art and the heavens. And I got really fixated on this one quote of Flannery O'Connor's that I'm going to botch now, but about how she used to wrestle with her guardian angel. She used to try to sock at him. And this is also an advertisement for our movie because the quote is featured in the scene. And I was thinking about fighting your guardian angel and about that maybe that's what I had been doing, that I had good instincts and a good spirit, but I had been working against my best self instead of with my best self. And so the song Chaos Angel was born from that feeling. And then I kind of retroactively went through all my other songs and was like, oh, these are all about different kinds of relationships: familial love, romantic love, friendship love, the love of the world, the love of like even the people who like and listen to my music. There's aspects of all of that in this record. And I realized that each song was kind of centered on a problem or a mistake that I felt like I had made, a flaw in me, in my relationships. And I thought, oh, how awesome. I want to tell the story of fighting my guardian angel and build a character of the guardian angel that isn't some higher, perfect being, but is actually a being just as flawed as I am, someone that you can fight with. And that's where kind of the myth and the idea of the Chaos Angel came from.
These are some themes that, because in fact, some of these songs did start a while ago. There are themes that you were exploring on the earlier albums, and that as you get more familiar with yourself, you undoubtedly have a different perspective on. When you talked about earlier recordings feeling like, that it wasn't as much of you in it, I wonder, sort of looking back now, how you see more of yourself in your music on this album, how that comes through. And do you think that's something that is gaining life experience helps that go further?
I don't know about life experience, but I definitely think musical experience. I think that a lot of what becoming a great recording artist is about is thinning the gap between what you hear in your head and what's coming out of the speaker. And obviously always taking opportunities to expand and grow and have something better come out of the speaker than what you heard in your head. But you first have to be able to do that first thing of having it sound the way you heard it. And at least to me, I would never prescribe what anyone else needs to do, but for me. So that I think is kind of the big step forward that I took on this record, both through, having worked with people a long time that now know me better, and with Christian at the helm, who has such similar taste to me. And that was extremely, extremely helpful. But now I feel like I've lost the real core of your question. Will you remind me what it was?
Well, yeah, actually, I'm going to zoom out from there a little bit with the kernel of the same question in it, because where we're headed is I want to go back in time to younger you, when you were first starting to feel creative in any way, but with the beginnings of musical creativity and love of music. I wonder, tell me about what first drew you to being creative in any way.
I mean, absolutely. I I have been writing songs since I think I was like 8 or 9 years old. And my first songs were mostly just songs from the television show Hannah Montana that I rewrote lyrics to. I really loved music and singing as a tool for memorization. I'm one of those people who, and I've been doing this since I was a kid, prepares for my conversations. It's a kind of psychotic trait, but like if I'm going to have to talk to someone about something, I practice. And one way that I used to practice and memorize what I was going to say was by singing it to a melody. So I would be, getting ready to talk to my mom about how I wanted to go to Sarah Jane's house for a sleepover. And I would sing through it to try to remember how I intended to word it. And I was really dyslexic and I wasn't very good at writing things down. So it was also a great tool for me to practice memorizing my home, how to eat green eggs and ham so that I could pretend that I could read it in front of my classmates. I did manage to use memorization to trick my teachers and classmates into thinking I could read until about the third grade when they started whipping out the chapter books. But all in all, it was a huge part of my life that I then started taking guitar lessons and writing songs on the guitar. And I just kind of kept doing it. And I had a great guitar teacher, Kimball Gallagher, who encouraged me to write songs, and quickly realized that I was going to learn a lot faster if I was practicing on my own songs than if I was learning covers and stuff. And so we moved in that direction. And then I think it was at the end of 8th grade, I had played at Cafe Vivaldi in New York. I did I'm sure it was a gimmick. I felt like it was very important and I'd gotten a gig, but I'm sure I would, just someone was doing someone a favor. But I played like 15 of my own songs on guitar for like all my friends and family. And then I didn't do it again for years. Something about that moment, it was really exciting and inspiring and terrifying. And I didn't want to do it anymore. And I dove into acting and kind of creative writing and poetry and kind of spent all of high school working on those things. And then my first year at drama school working on that. And it wasn't until I started working professionally as an actor that I returned to songwriting, kind of because I needed a creative outlet to get through the periods of time where no one's giving you a role and there's nothing you can do. And that's when I started really focusing and making music. But I brought a lot of my songs to Jesse Harris when I was first writing, because he'd been a guiding light for me as a writer as a kid, because he was a close friend of my father's. And after working on it with him a little bit, I was like, what if you just wrote music and I wrote a poem to it? And then I started doing that for a couple years. And it's not until this record that I've kind of decided to do less of that and believe in myself again, that like my 8th grade self, I can write music still.
So let's go back though to a little bit of the earlier you again, because what was the role model, or what were the templates for you as a kid thinking? What were the sort of templates for the songs you were writing at that time, and the kind of artist you, admittedly in a kid-like view, saw yourself as maybe trying to be?
I think I saw myself as trying to be like, what if I could combine like Joni Mitchell and Fiona Apple with Hannah Montana? Like, what if I could take the like rocker energy of Hannah Montana and the kind of obscene butterfly poetry of Joni Mitchell and Fiona Apple, and they would both hate me for referring to that as butterfly poetry. What the frick am I talking about? The kind of experimental, imaginative exploration of the mysteries of the universe poetry of Fiona Apple and Joni Mitchell is a better way of putting that. And combine that with a Hannah Montana feel. And that's kind of what I was going for, I think, as a kid.
In that early phase, did writing music feel like an important outlet for you? Did it feel even then? Because it sounds like from what you were saying earlier that songwriting is at this point like a way of processing kind of where you are in the world and how you're feeling about things. And did you feel in a way that you couldn't articulate yet as a kid that it was that?
Felt like a really strong way to communicate. Maybe because my parents are artists, if I had something I wanted to say, if I was feeling something powerfully, if I just cried about it, if I just sat on the couch and like was like, I don't want to go to my tutoring, I hate it, I hate school, I hate this, it didn't make much of an impact. They were just like, you got to. But if I collected my thoughts and I made sense of them and I made them rhyme and I presented them in a performance, they were much more impactful in and I think that that's still true. You know, it's a big tool of the arts to be heard. When you put effort into what you're saying, people hear you more. And so I think it was a huge communication tool for me, and it still is.
What do the sort of creativity acts in music and acting kind of have in common for you? Like, do you think there's something about having gotten more confident in acting during those years that brought back your confidence toward that kind of musical expression?
Totally. I mean, I think that I see them as all coming from the same source. I see like all the arts as there's just the one source, and it's like spirit or like self or soul, whatever you want to call it. And it's inside of you and it's outside of you. Like it's things you can capture and catch, and it's also things that are just in your heart. And there are these different tools that we have to funnel it out. And I find that acting really helps me to learn about the world, because the task of acting is to empathize with other kinds of people and to find their energy in yourself, which usually just helps you learn about a part of you that you didn't know existed yet. And songwriting is more diving within. Who am I really? What do I really think? Where am I really going? And expressing yourself that way. And so I think they feed each other really well, because you need to know about yourself to understand other people, and you need to understand other people to learn about yourself.
Tell me a bit about your lyric writing process. You've said that a lot of times you're starting with a poem. You're starting with a poem that was written as a poem in some instances, but yeah, nowadays with this kind of phase you're at now
It's changing.
Yeah.
I'm trying a thing more lately where instead of, I used to kind of write one giant long poem in one fell swoop, and then basically cut the parts of it that sucked out, and hopefully there was enough left that would be a song. And now I'm doing more collecting, like collecting good lines and a good idea or a concept for a song, and trying to sort of fit the lines I'm finding into the puzzle of what the song is I'm trying to write about. And so I've been doing a lot of that lately, but a little bit of both. Like every now and then the waterfall will come, but I'm doing more intentional writing and not as much just waiting for the sun to rise, you know? Yeah, so it's definitely changing. Like basically I have a lot of notes in my phone, and I kind of collect lines in different piles for different songs and sort through them and try to finish them. And when they get close to done, I move them to a Google document. And then I keep at the base of the Google document like a lot of other garbage that I may or may not want to include somewhere, so that I can kind of scroll down and be like, oh, that line's bad, but this line could work there. And kind of that's sort of how I've been working since Chaos Angel. But before that, I worked totally differently.
Yeah, I can tell. One of the things that I really love about your songs is that you have an ear for like a metaphor, or like that could run really deep, you know, sort of like something that's an observation, that's a detail to notice, but that's also like a metaphor that can be woven through the song. And I wonder, yeah, like who are some of your favorite writers, whether it's lyric writers or just or poets or whatever, that you feel like, not to say an influence, but that you admire?
Well, I love that you noticed that metaphor thing. I work really hard not to get stuck on metaphors. You know, I think that that can happen really easily, where you're like, oh, I'm going to do a metaphor about cooking food and how that like helps me take care of myself. But then all of a sudden you get to the end of the song and the whole thing is about cooking food, and you're like, oh shoot, like you got to move on faster than that, you know. And so I work really hard on that. So thank you for noticing. So that's that. People who inspire me. I mean, I've been incredibly shaped by people like Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell and Chris Christopherson and Willie Nelson and Liz Phair and Taylor Swift. And you know, like it's a countless list. I was really lucky to be exposed to a ton of music as a kid. And Judy Sill, Patti Smith, Bruce Springsteen. I mean, it's like, it's kind of a little all over the place.
Is there an example of like an artist or artist that you heard as a kid that was like you rejected because you're like, oh, that's older people music, that's parent music, but then now that you're an adult, you're like, oh shit, they were right?
I had a weird childhood in that like the adults in my life were extremely cool. Even if they weren't always perfect, they were really cool. And I never had the feeling that they were into lame stuff. I was never like, oh, that's parent music. If anything, I was actually more embarrassed about the stuff I liked that they didn't like. That was more embarrassing to me. I mean, I one of the first concerts I ever went to was to see Bright Eyes at Carnegie Hall, and like to see Wilco. And like that's, some classic dad rock, but I loved it. And so yeah, I didn't have, any real walls about that. Like my mom always listens to Tracy Chapman in the kitchen while she cooks, and I loved Tracy. Like they didn't reject me. They were never like, turn down that rock music, like, and I didn't reject them really. I loved like Dylan and Lucinda Williams and like all those people as a kid. I think I had a real like freak identity as a kid. Like, I had a real like, I'm a weirdo. Like I can talk to trees. I did not think I was cool. So I felt pretty alienated by like cool kid music. And I felt pretty into the music from the 60s and 70s and the almost the spirituality that I felt inside of it. It felt like it was searching for something broader to me at the time and more profound. I've almost had the reverse of like getting into the music of my own time later now. And like going back and being like, wait, I want to listen to some 2000s pop right now. Like that, what was that vibe? I've kind of missed it. And now kind of going back and loving it actually.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you mentioned Judy Sill earlier, and yeah, I want to talk a little bit about Judy Sill because I know you're connected to as a producer. Am I understanding correctly this Judy Sill documentary?
Yeah, I mean, very casually in some ways, and I didn't have anything to do with the making of the doc. I just I got really interested in her story and found out there was a doc and watched it and kind of figured that the people who were working on the doc probably had her life rights and reached out to them to talk about the idea of making a feature and ended up talking a lot to them about the doc and very, very happily agreed to be a producer on it because I really want people to know her music more. And I think it's so beautiful. And I feel so lucky that I was put in touch with this community of people who've been working so hard to get that information and that music out there.
Yeah, I'm so intrigued. I notice you're referred to as a multi-hyphenate, that term that's used for people who are major multitaskers and somehow manage to get lots of stuff done. And I wonder if you see yourself as someone who wants to be doing all of this stuff at the same time, if that's important to you going forward as well, to be making all kinds of things.
I guess I feel like in this day and age, and I don't know what it used to be like. I know what people say it used to be like, but I think that there used to be a life of an actor that was just that, where you could read plays and get sent scripts and go on auditions and hopefully get a good job and then start getting more offers to do better jobs and the scripts would be good and people were investing large amounts of money into big budget dramas that were well written and well directed. And that seems to be a pretty dying landscape. And it seems to me that if you want to make art that you really believe in, you have to sit in the driver's seat of your life and your creativity and try to not just participate in things you love, but initiate things you love. And it seems like the only option. So whether or not I want to be doing it, I don't know. Like I might really prefer to sit in my house and have great scripts sent to me and agree to do them and, write little poems and collect them in my drawer and live a fabulous life of being a 1970s movie star. That could be great too, but I don't know if it exists anymore. And I'm a really creative person. I'm a really collaborative person. And the life that I have built for myself is the only kind of option I see to be as creative as I want to be in our current climate.
And so the rest of this year, I mean, obviously you're in Atlanta and you're filming right now and there's things that are finished, haven't come out yet, but is it mostly going to be touring and focusing on the music stuff? Is there like a big tour planned?
Well, this year I'm working on Stranger Things and we started in January and we'll probably finish in January. This show has been the most unspeakable gift in my life of like structure and play and time on set and being a part of something that everybody likes is a very, very rare life experience. And this is the last season. So I'm really trying to give it my all and the respect that it's due. I feel lucky that in the intervening time between this season and last season, I got to do a bunch of stuff. And I'm so excited to share that stuff. But I think I won't really be able to participate in anything particularly time consuming or travel demanding until after the season's over. So this year is kind of exactly what you're looking at.
Birds chirping,
Birds chirping.
Sounds lovely. Well, I think that's about it, Maya. Thank you so much for getting together to do this.
Thanks for talking to me. You ask awesome questions. You're so smart, and I can't appreciate your time and your investment more. So thank you.
Thanks again to Maya for that conversation, and thank you again for listening to the LSQ podcast. And I'll keep you posted as Maya announces any upcoming shows. Of course, you heard her mention that they're filming the final season of Stranger Things, so that's very exciting as well. And in a couple of weeks, I'll have episode 109 with Maddie Diaz, so follow if there's an option to do that wherever you listen to podcasts so that you get that episode as soon as it's out. And reach me on social platforms at JennyLSQ.